His voice echoed from the hallway. Jess, I'll be home late again. The site meeting ran long. I smiled weakly, pretending I did not mind, pretending I was not already lost. Hours later, while he was still at work building our life, I was home, destroying it. I remember the warmth of another man's hands, the rush of a choice I could never take back, and the echo of guilt that began before it even ended. Before I tell you how everything fell apart, I want to take a moment to thank all my returning viewers and subscribers. You all mean the world to me. Every like, every comment, and every new subscriber fuels this channel and keeps these real stories alive. If you are new here, welcome, and I truly cannot wait for you to hit that subscribe button. Please share your thoughts in the comments below as you listen to my story. Now, let me tell you how it all began. My name is Jessica Reed, and for most of my adult life, people called me lucky. I had what looked like a picture-perfect life in a small town outside Charlotte, North Carolina. My husband, Daniel, was the kind of man mothers told their daughters to marry, dependable, loyal, and patient. We had been married for 7 years, living in a quiet white house with a trimmed lawn, 2 golden retrievers, and a world that looked peaceful from the outside. But if you stepped inside our home, you would notice something else: silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that weighs on the walls. Daniel's construction business had taken off, and with it his time. Most mornings he left before sunrise, and most nights he came home after I was asleep. I told myself I understood. He was doing it for us. But what I never admitted, not even to myself, was that I had begun to resent being invisible. I did not plan to fall. No woman ever does. It started innocently, or so I told myself. Our next-door neighbor, Ethan, had moved in about a year earlier. He was around our age, early 30s, tall, calm, and always smiling. He lived alone, worked remotely as a designer, and seemed to have all the time Daniel did not. At first, it was nothing more than polite exchanges. A wave across the driveway. Small talk about the weather or our dogs. But small talk has a way of growing when 2 lonely people feed it. One afternoon, I was struggling to carry grocery bags from my car. Daniel had promised to help that day, but work called him away again. Ethan saw me struggling and came over. His sleeves were rolled up, and his easy smile made my heart flutter. A reaction I immediately hated myself for. "Let me help you with those," he said. I wanted to say no. I should have said no. But instead I found myself thanking him. And the next thing I knew, we were laughing in my kitchen as he set the bags on the counter. That laughter, it felt like oxygen after weeks of holding my breath. From that day, Ethan and I began to cross invisible lines. He would wave when Daniel left for work, and I would wave back longer than I should. He started showing up when I was outside watering the flowers or taking out the trash. We talked about everything: music, dreams, even the loneliness that came with pretending to have a perfect life. He listened in a way Daniel no longer did, and that was all it took for the seed of temptation to grow. One Friday afternoon he invited me to join him for coffee. "Nothing serious," he said. "Just company." The coffee turned into a 2-hour conversation. The 2-hour conversation turned into the beginning of a secret. And secrets have a way of making you feel alive. Right until they start suffocating you. It was a warm spring day when I realized I had gone too far. Daniel had left before dawn again, leaving a note on the counter with a simple, "Love you. Be back late." I stared at that note longer than I should have, wondering when those words had stopped feeling real. I went outside to clear my head. Ethan was mowing his lawn. When he saw me, he cut the engine and walked over. His shirt clung to his chest, sweat glistening across his arms, and his smile, that smile, disarmed me. "Rough morning?" he asked. I nodded. "You could say that." He leaned against the fence, close enough for me to smell the faint scent of cologne mixed with fresh grass. I felt my heart race. I wanted to step back, but I did not. That was the moment I realized this was no longer about comfort. It was attraction, dangerous, undeniable attraction. That night, Daniel called to say he would be working late again. I said it was fine, but my voice trembled. After hanging up, I sat in silence, my phone heavy in my hand, my thoughts louder than the ticking clock on the wall. Every part of me knew what I wanted to do was wrong. Yet a part of me, the broken, lonely part, wanted to feel alive again. I went to bed early that night, but I could not sleep. I kept seeing Ethan's face, hearing his laugh, feeling the tension that had been building for weeks. Guilt and desire danced in my chest like fire and ice. The following week, the rain poured relentlessly. Daniel texted that he would be gone late again. I looked out the window, watching water roll down the glass, and something inside me snapped. When Ethan texted me, "You okay? You seem quiet today," I answered before thinking, "No, I am not okay." Minutes later, he was at my door. Standing there with an umbrella, soaked from the rain, he looked at me like he had been waiting for me all along. I stepped aside, letting him in. That was the first irreversible choice. I will not go into every detail of what happened after. What I can tell you is this: guilt starts the very second passion ends. I remember sitting on the edge of my bed afterward, staring at my reflection in the mirror. My heart raced, my hands trembled, and I could still hear Daniel's voice in my head. His laugh, his promises, his trust. Ethan reached for my hand, but I pulled away. I felt sick, not because of him, but because of me. For the first time in our marriage, I realized what it truly meant to betray someone who loved you. I still remember the light that day, soft, golden, and peaceful. It was the kind of light that makes the world look calm even when your soul is anything but. I stood at the kitchen window, watching Daniel's truck disappear down the street like I had 100 times before. But this time felt different. It felt like I was saying goodbye to more than just a husband leaving for work. The house was silent again, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the faint sound of rain dripping from the morning storm. My heart was heavy, yet restless. Every part of me knew that what I had done could never be undone. And yet the memory of it still lingered, not just in my body, but deep inside my mind. It haunted me and tempted me at the same time. Ethan's text arrived just as I turned away from the window. "Can we talk?" Those 3 words froze me in place. I told myself not to answer. I told myself that whatever this was needed to end before it destroyed me completely. But guilt has a strange way of disguising itself as closure. So I wrote back, "Just for a minute." When I opened the door, Ethan stood there in his usual calmness. He wore a gray hoodie, jeans, and a look that said he had been replaying everything just as much as I had. There was no charm in his smile this time, no light flirtation. Only quiet tension that filled the air between us. He said he just wanted to talk, but the way his eyes searched mine told me this conversation would not be simple. We sat across from each other at the dining table. My fingers kept tracing the rim of my coffee mug, trying to focus on anything but his eyes. He finally spoke. "I cannot stop thinking about you, Jess." The room went still. I could not look at him, yet I could not ignore him either. I had already crossed a line once, and I knew another step could ruin everything I had left. But emotions are not logical. They are powerful, reckless waves that do not ask for permission. And mine were crashing hard. That afternoon, I tried to convince myself that it had been a mistake, that what happened between us was a one-time weakness. I wanted to believe that I could bury it beneath chores, dinners, and smiles for Daniel. But guilt is not something you can bury. It breathes right beside you. Daniel noticed the change almost immediately. He would ask why I seemed distracted. I told him I was just tired, but the truth was, I could not look at him without feeling like a fraud. At night, I would lie beside him, listening to his steady breathing. My chest would ache with guilt. He would turn over, sometimes wrapping his arm around me, and instead of comfort, I felt trapped inside my own betrayal. I could still feel Ethan's touch, still remember the words we never should have said. It was as if 2 versions of me existed. The loyal wife Daniel saw, and the broken woman I became the moment I said yes to temptation. Days turned into weeks, and I started living in constant anxiety. Every text message sound made my heart jump. Every unexpected phone call made my stomach twist. I began erasing messages, deleting call logs, hiding evidence that only I knew existed. I hated what I had become, secretive, paranoid, dishonest. Yet the more I tried to end things with Ethan, the harder it became. He was my reminder of how far I had fallen, but also the only one who knew the truth. One afternoon, Daniel called from work and told me he might be home early. My chest tightened with panic. It was strange. The thought of him coming home used to make me happy. Now it terrified me. The house that once felt like a haven had become a prison filled with invisible walls built from guilt and lies. It was late one Thursday when the doorbell rang. Daniel was still at work, and my first thought was that it might be a delivery. But when I opened the door, Ethan stood there again, this time without warning. "I needed to see you," he said quietly. My hands trembled. I wanted to tell him to leave, but part of me was relieved he was there. Guilt and desire were two flames burning in opposite directions, yet both were destroying me. He stepped inside. I backed away, not wanting to be near him and yet unable to stop myself. "Ethan," I said softly, "this has to stop. We cannot keep doing this." He nodded slowly but did not leave. "Then tell me you do not feel it. Tell me you do not think about me when he is gone." That broke me. I had no answer because it was true. The air between us thickened with tension. Not passion, not romance. Just the weight of what should never have been. Before I knew it, the distance between us disappeared again. When it was over, I sat in silence, unable to move. The sound of my own heartbeat filled the room like a drum of shame. Ethan tried to speak, but I shook my head. I could not listen. I did not even want to look at him. All I could see was Daniel, the man who trusted me, loved me, and worked hard every day while I destroyed the life we built. Ethan left quietly, and I sat there for hours, staring at nothing. The walls felt closer, the air heavier. The guilt that had been whispering now screamed inside my head. I tried to convince myself that I could still fix it, that Daniel would never find out, that I could be the perfect wife again. But lies do not fade, they grow. Every time I looked into my husband's eyes, I saw a reflection of my betrayal staring back. A few days later, it happened. I was in the kitchen cooking dinner when my phone buzzed. It was a message from Ethan, a long one. He wrote about how he could not handle pretending anymore, how he wanted to see me again, how he missed me. Before I could delete it, Daniel walked in. I froze, my heart thundering. He asked, "Who is that?" I smiled nervously. "Just a friend." He nodded and kissed my forehead, but I could feel his eyes linger on the phone as he walked away. Something in me knew that moment was the beginning of the end. That night, I could barely eat. Daniel talked about work, plans for the weekend, maybe visiting his parents. I nodded, pretending to listen, my body there but my mind far away. Every time he smiled, it hurt. Every time he said he loved me, I wanted to scream. I knew I did not deserve those words anymore. When he went to bed, I stayed awake on the couch, staring at the glow of my phone screen. Ethan had texted again. "We need to tell him. You cannot live like this forever." I turned off my phone and whispered into the darkness, "You are right. But I cannot let it happen." By the time the clock struck midnight, I knew my secret was unraveling. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach. I crept into the bedroom and looked at Daniel sleeping. His face looked calm, peaceful, completely unaware of the storm that was coming. I wanted to reach out and touch him, to tell him I was sorry, but I had no right. The truth had a heartbeat now, and I knew it would not stay hidden much longer. The night it all came out didn't start like a storm, it started quietly. Daniel had been distant for days, and I could feel the space growing between us. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet in the way silence can scream louder than words. I tried to ignore it, but something deep inside me knew. He knew. Daniel woke up before me that morning. I heard him in the kitchen, the clatter of plates and the smell of coffee filling the house. It felt almost normal, but the tension in the air said otherwise. When I walked in, he looked up and smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile that reaches the eyes. "Morning," he said softly. "Morning," I whispered back, pretending nothing was wrong. We sat together at the table, him reading messages on his phone, me stirring my coffee that had already gone cold. My hands trembled slightly, but I hid them under the table. I didn't know what he knew or how, but I knew that day wouldn't end quietly. After breakfast, I went upstairs to make the bed. My phone buzzed again. It was Ethan. "We need to talk. I can't keep pretending. He deserves to know." I froze. Before I could delete it, I heard footsteps. I turned. Daniel was standing in the doorway, his eyes locked on the phone in my hand. "What's that?" he asked. "Nothing," I said quickly, too quickly. He held out his hand. Let me see it. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst. Daniel, it's not what you think. He didn't say anything. He just held out his hand again, calm, steady, terrifyingly sure. When I didn't move, he stepped closer and gently took the phone from me. I didn't fight it. I couldn't. He looked down at the screen. And the silence that followed was the longest minute of my life. He read every word. His jaw tightened. His breathing grew heavier. When he finally looked up, his eyes weren't angry. They were broken. How long? His voice was quiet, almost too calm. That hurt more than if he had screamed. Daniel, please, I whispered, tears already burning my eyes. It just happened. I didn't mean for. He laughed. Not the kind of laugh you hear in happiness, but the kind you hear right before someone shatters. You didn't mean to? He repeated. Jess, I trusted you with my whole life. I would have died believing you'd never do this. Every word cut deeper than the last. I tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. All I could do was cry, not out of fear of losing him, but out of the guilt of knowing I already had. Daniel didn't yell. He didn't throw anything. He just stood there, his face pale and his eyes distant. He put the phone down on the dresser and said, I need to get out of here. When the door closed behind him, I collapsed. The sound of that door, that single click, felt like my soul leaving my body. I screamed into the empty room, begged God to undo what I had done. But the only thing that answered me was silence. That night, I stayed on the floor for hours. My wedding ring felt heavy on my finger. The house that had once been filled with love now felt haunted by every lie I'd told. Days passed before Daniel came home. When he did, it was late. His eyes were tired, red, and hollow. He sat on the couch while I stood by the window, unable to move closer. He finally said, I don't hate you, Jess. But I don't know if I can ever see you the same way again. Tears streamed down my face as I whispered, I understand. He nodded slowly. I need time. That was it. No promises. No forgiveness. Just time. When he walked away again, I fell to my knees. But this time, I didn't cry for him. I cried for the woman I had become. Weeks turned into months. Daniel and I barely spoke, but he didn't leave completely. He was there, but distant, like a shadow of the man who once held me so close. I started therapy. I started praying again. Really praying, not just out of fear, but out of a desperate need for healing. I told God everything. Every ugly truth. Every secret. Every regret. Some nights, I'd sit alone and write letters to Daniel. Letters I never gave him. Letters where I confessed not just what I'd done, but why. How loneliness had become a doorway for sin. How selfishness blinded me. How I had mistaken attention for love. Each word was a step toward facing myself. One evening, months later, Daniel came home from work and found me in the kitchen. I was cooking, the same meal I made the night before everything fell apart. He stood in the doorway and said quietly, You're still wearing your ring. I looked down and nodded. Because I'm still your wife, even if I don't deserve to be. He took a deep breath and said, I'm not ready to forget, but I'm trying to forgive. That one sentence was more powerful than any, I love you. He sat at the table and I joined him. We ate in silence, but it wasn't the same silence that had haunted us. This one felt peaceful. Like maybe, just maybe, God was giving us a chance to rebuild what I had destroyed. I learned that forgiveness isn't just something you receive. It's something you have to live worthy of every day. Daniel's grace didn't erase my mistakes. It reminded me that love, real love, doesn't come easy. It survives storms, betrayal, and brokenness, not because it's blind, but because it chooses to heal. And as I lay beside him one night, still uncertain of our future but thankful for his presence, I whispered to God, Thank you for giving me another sunrise.